Hello, hello. My name is Renata. I'm a postdoctoral fellowship at the Institute of Psychology. Today I have the pleasure to present our symposium called Evolutionary Feminism. I would like to thank the organizers for this kind invitation. And I will briefly make a self-description in order to improve diversity. So I am a white woman with long hair, long black hair. I'm wearing a white t-shirt, glasses, and behind me there is the auditorium of the School of Architecture and Urbanism at the University of São Paulo. Okay. This symposium is composed of five now, female scientists from different backgrounds, which will present in the following order. The first presenter will be Dr. Amaral, that is here. Dr. Amaral is a senior full professor from the Institute of Physics at University of São Paulo. Her approach englobes kinematics, basic physics, comparative primatology, paleoanthropology, and she was the first woman to link human bipedalism and laws of body hair, and a lot of stuff that Leah will tell you afterwards. The second talk will be with assistant professor at the University of Santiago, Chile, Ana Maria Fernandes, that today will just give us a glimpse, or a glimpse actually in English, to introduce the talk of Maryanne Fischer. Topics of interest of Ana Maria are mate choice and conformity, jealousy and romantic attachment, affectivity and emotions in interpersonal relationships. Now, Maryanne Fischer, that is a professor at St. Mary's University. Her topics of interest are interpersonal relationships, female intrasexual competition, mating strategies, female attractiveness, and Maryanne is a very important woman that is investigating the link between feminist approaches and evolutionary psychology. And come on, we have two more, that is me, Renata deFelipe. My topics of interest, my mainly topics of interest are maternal mental health, caregiver-infant relationship, and infant development, social, emotional, and motor infant development, actually. And my theoretical backgrounds are mainly, I will just cite two, evolutionary developmental psychology and developmental systems theory, and finally, Dr. Lilian Luchesi, that her topics of interest are physiology of emotions in twins and social behavior, and her research englobes, let me see, animal behavior, human ethology, experimental psychology, and this is it. Okay, so now I will pass the voice for Dr. Amaral.
É assim, né? Ai, cadê o troço de virar? Ela não me deixou aqui. Aqui, ó. É. Põe em tamanho grande. Não, só um tamanho só. Não quero dois. Não, um só. Eu não quero dois, quero um só. So, this title, Safe Caring of Heavy Infants Together with Her Properties Explain Human Evolution. Não passou. Tentei, mas não foi. Tá, deixa aí. So, this is the title of a paper published in Frontiers this year in the Journal of Evolutionary Psychology. And it is a specific research topic, 150 years celebration of Darwin's book. And then they wrote specifically that biographical comments would be welcome. So here, I will not speak only about science. I will join science with life story. And my life story is facility in maths plus suffering as a woman. And so that's what I'm going to speak here. So I start with this nice picture of the book in Portuguese. And it is a bit broken because I have used it so much. So I say, I came in contact with Darwin's book on sexual selection by chance in '75, while walking in the street where I then lived. I crossed the street exactly in front of a bookshop, where the book was exposed in the showcase, since it was published the year before in my language, Portuguese. I decided to buy it because I was recovering from a crisis which changed completely my life. And the subject fitted almost exactly in what I was looking for, even without knowing it. Não está passando. It was completely different than what I had learned at school, when only natural selection was mentioned in biology. I underlined all important points of Darwin's text over 700 pages. Striking for me were the evidence on animals, plus human skin, and sexually dimorphic vocalizations. The idea of aesthetic female choice was especially intriguing for me. And I read also in Portuguese, The Naked Ape. All these ideas about biological evolution were then mixed with studies of psychoanalysis, Freud and several authors, pedagogy, Piaget, and anthropology, Lévi-Strauss and Roger Bastide. Then I started to make a parallel, independent research in human evolution. And I have published papers in '89, '96, then I retired from physics, but published in 2008, and now 2022. So I will first mention something about my career as a physicist, so that you don't think that I'm just a crazy woman proposing crazy things. So born 41, high school in science and maths, 56, 58, very good in math, interested in chemistry and biology, but disliked to memorize. Physics seemed a miscellany of disconnected subjects. So I decided for bachelor and licentiate for secondary teachers, and I have done it from 59 to 62. And I chose physics to discover what was that, because it was meaningless for me. So in '62, here is my photo in graduation. At that time, it was like that. So in '62, in my last year, I moved from day to night courses at Maria Antônia, FEFECLUSP, and at the same time, full-time scientific research with a fellowship using neutrons in the nuclear reactor to study nuclear properties of rare earths. Project of interest to production of uranium. And made also the first course in computing given by IBM in Brazil. Next year, I got a full-time job in the reactor, and then I became responsible for a research project in rare earths, plus courses of specialization, theoretical nuclear physics, electronics, and reactor physics, and presented my paper in an international congress. Then I was sent to Sweden. Look how different I am already from the lady that made graduate. From April 64 to June 65, they have sent me with a fellowship from the International Atomic Energy Agency to work in a similar reactor in Stockholm, Sweden, to learn and bring research line back home. And the line, it was very complex, hydrogenous liquids with interest for reactors. My stay in Sweden defined my life. I felt anonymous. Finally, I looked equal to everybody. Here I was different from everybody. And free in the ambient. Nobody imagined that I was Brazilian. I learned to stand loneliness and to separate professional responsibility from personal life. So, July 65, I took holidays in Italy alone because I'm half-blood. My mother was daughter of Italians. August 65, returned to São Paulo, Brazil, turmoil. I will not even say how it was. 68, political change in university system. July 68, got married. September 68, my father died, terrible. June 69, master degree in nuclear science and technology at the Polytechnic of São Paulo. In 69, I started a PhD in molecular physics, phase transitions in a plastic crystal. In 72, I became pregnant in March, but I still wrote and finished my PhD thesis. My daughter was born December 72, 5 days after my thesis defense. Of course, next year, personal crisis due to maternity, decided to quit my full-time federal job. After some months at home, I started a part-time compromise at the new Institute of Physics. It was formed in 70. But marriage collapsed, and some months later, I did have a personal breakdown. And that was in 75 when I went across Darwin's book. So in August 76, I got tenure at the FUS because my daughter could go to the kindergarten. In 91, I became the first woman full professor of physics at USP. In 93, I succeeded in the creation of a new department of applied physics. In September 95, I could stand no longer. I asked for voluntary retirement, free from politics. So I started independent research in physics, chemistry, plus biophysics, plus research in human evolution focused in connection between infant caring and hair properties. And so now I'm going to make this timeline, and I will speak about it. It starts in 75. D0 is Darwin's zero book I read, and goes to 2022, and it is in proportion to the time. This first point, SSA, so I will start with what I did before retirement. SSA was my first article in Portuguese presented at a meeting of Lacan group in psychoanalysis. I presented and I decided that it was not possible to follow this route. It was impossible to arrive to humans following this route, so I decided to abandon human science, stay in exact science, that's my formation, but move to biology. So, in parallel with everything I did in physics, I studied animal communication crossing with human communication. I studied sociosexual behavior of hominoids. I studied biological difference between animals and humans. And I studied heat transmission to analyze reasons for nakedness in women. Now, what I did after retirement as senior professor to reach this next P3 paper in 2008. I understood in detail reduction of body hairs in primates. I understand in detail mechanics of infant carrying in primates. And I understand in detail erect position in humans. My drive was curiosity. I need to understand. I could just live and do nothing. The physicist would have adored that I would stop doing this crazy work. But discover by myself gives me intellectual pleasure. Not only men have that, huh? I have it also. So here is my paper, One Global View. That's the Human Evolution Journal where I publish it. And here the reference. This paper is based in the discovery of Lucy, proving that bipedality was established 4 million years ago at the forest fringe under a vegetable diet. The complete text is available, and there I show a simple analysis on survival probabilities, where I show that body fat reduction brings bipedality as a necessary consequence before the conditions of total nakedness is attained. It was a crazy paper because it was just an explosion. And here I synthesize what 1,000 words could not explain. So you see in these slides that I have made, up the usual cladogram with locomotion based on males. You see there, you have this classic cladogram, million years of evolution, and then the species going out, the New World monkeys, Old World monkeys, gibbons, orangutan, gorillas, chimpanzees, and finally men upwards. Why is this like that? Why woman is like that? The man is like that. So my proposal is very simple, trivial, obvious. So my proposal since '89, what we have is reduction of body fur along millions of years, starting with the normal animal quadruped transporting the infant, and the next holding the infant with one hand, and finally getting up, and how it is today. So this is more or less obvious. But no man can accept it. They refuse even to discuss it. So my next paper was on nakedness, and I will not speak, I don't have time to enter in details. I made a lot of calculation, tables, everything. My conclusions were confirmed with discoveries of fossils in following years and are integrated in accepted views of human evolution today. But of course, I saw it before everybody published, so they start to mention me slowly. Now I will explain a little what's the problem with hairs. Here is a line of relative hair density with size of primates. Data is Schultz from 31, but only in 81, Schwartz and Rosenblum could show that this is a basic law that all primates follow, but not us. We cannot be put in this law because we don't have hairs. But we can see all the monkeys there, and then the gibbon. It's very small, together with the monkeys, then orangutan and gorilla, very big, very low, and chimpanzees already deviate because chimpanzees have less hairs proportionally. So now let's look a bit how these animals carry their children. So first, the arboreal primates. The monkey have tail, and you even see the tail of the infant rolling around the tail of the mother. And then you have gibbons, the very light and very hairy, and see how the mother holds the infant, carrying here, and then clinging but carrying the infant also. And then the big orangutan, very big, the poor mother, how she's hanging in the trees with the tree and holding an infant with the hand. And the male outside just looking, because it's very well established that with orangutan, only the female takes care of the children. And what's about the gorilla? And the gorilla, here there is a photo of the gorilla, and here the mathematical analysis I have made, basic mechanics from the first year. Safe infant carrying defined by inclination angle, theta, and friction coefficient, mi. The gorilla cannot get up, otherwise the infant goes down and dies. Nobody has, and then I looked to see the angles of the gorilla, and it is exactly explained by my theory. Then what about the chimpanzee? Here are drawings made from photos from Van Lawick Goodall. And the chimpanzee is not so big, and he can be both terrestrial and arboreal. And both gorilla and chimpanzee have tripedal walk adopted with small infants. But for a few months, for the first 2 months, then finally the child can hold itself and they go to quadruped again. So my hypothesis, reduction of body hairs extended the length in time of tripedal locomotion, initially of some months, to the point that it became more effective to adopt bipedalism. And I needed to do experiment because people refused to believe. So I got 3 pieces of skin with hairs, 200 centimeters each, and I will obtain it by Christine Berge personally. And then I made these 7 samples with a taxidermist that I paid privately. And so the skins are very easily decided. The gorilla is something, the gibbon is different, the orangutan is different. I made the samples with different area to really be able to study. This, I made it myself. Simple measurements of friction coefficient to prove what I am proposing theoretically. So I measure the tangent of critical angle, and then very funny, depends on humidity, of course. Hair is used as hygrometer to measure humidity. So clearly, if you move the humidity in the ambient, the conditions for equilibrium are breakdown. Then I made a very simple experiment, putting weight to see how much a bunch of hairs could stand before going away from the skin of the mother. And a very defined result, 1 kilogram per centimeter square. Not possible to stand more. More is not physically possible. So now I enter in engineering stress-strain curves. So each hair I have put in this machine that measures the force down and then the elongation, the controlled displacement, and the stress is force per unit area. The strain is proportional to deformation, and that's the curve that every engineer knows. It is a stress-strain curve with a linear beginning that gives the Young modulus of elasticity, then goes to the plastic reason and finally breaks. And so everybody knows this, but not anthropologists. So here I put the picture that everybody knows. Now, my paper was published a few months later than Whitcomb et al., Nature, 2007, showing the disadvantages of bipedality for pregnant females. So the center of mass of chimpanzees and humans. Changing the center of mass for the chimpanzee, no problem at all for a quadruped. Goes on without problem, but for a woman, not possible, because the center of mass implies that the woman goes down in front. She falls down. So it's necessary a lordosis made by women, and this they have shown that exists already in Lucy. So let us look a bit Lucy. We know already that from fossils that biped locomotion appeared millions of years before increase of the brain. So nothing related of specialized behavior of women can be connected with bipedalism. No connection. The fact is that the bone shows this angle between the leg and this upper place here. This here, this does not work. Let me see. So important that I will try to show. Does not hold. But it is this angle that assures that the center of gravity is going to fall in the feet, and then the woman does not fall down. My point is that pregnancy is a problem only in the 3 last months of pregnancy. And carrying infants lasts for years in all hominoid primates. So I needed to do experiments to prove it. But when the people don't want to understand, it's useless. You can make everything, they don't even read. So my paper 3, really, I enter in the mechanical analysis of everything. So here is the one hair, and all the mechanical parts are defined by the inner cortex because there are molecular structures of keratin. This is very well defined. You don't need 1,000 measurements. It is already in the literature. But the equipment to measure these hair mechanical properties did not exist at physics. Nobody did it. So I went around and I found in IPT, the technological research at the campus. And I found the way to do it, and I went to do it. And these are my final very nice curves that I adore, of course. And they show very differences. The first is the human. From the hairs, a hair of my daughter I took as a sample. And then you see the gorilla, the gibbon, and the orangutan. And they are obviously different. I measured 10 just to have the official statistics done in biology. But it's just necessary to look, they are different. And then from the linear initial, I got the elastic limit, the slope of the curve is connected with the Young modulus through the hair cross-section. I measured everything. So now I will just show the results because I'm not going to spend hours explaining. So this is a resume of everything. In the upper, you have Young modulus of elasticity as a function of hair diameter and elastic limit. And you see the evolution from gibbon to orangutan and the other line to gorillas. And down, I have the species geographic location. So you have gibbon going to orangutan in Asia, and down gorilla in Africa. And the Young modulus of elasticity is the same in Asia for the small gibbon and for the large orangutan, but it is much higher for gorilla. So this is a very clear result, absolutely no doubt. So my obvious conclusion Her physical properties might have evolved correlated to the pressure of safe carrying of heavy infants at the change from arboreal to terrestrial locomotion. But there is a main ideological problem. The very strong resistance in the academy to the idea that bipedalism could be connected to a female problem. That means that it was not a male acquisition. Models are in fact developed from the point of view of the adult male individual. I focused instead the female perspective, including the connection with infants, which is of course the most important for reproduction and survival. I went a bit further. I analyzed the sociosexual characteristics of all the hominoids, and I made this cladogram. So you have first old world monkeys, then you have a line that finally arrives after millions of years to chimpanzee, and then you have a line going to gibbons, other to orangutan, gorilla, and then woman. And then the obvious connections. Gibbons are monogamous. Orang and gorilla grow very much in size due obviously to sexual selection. But you have one single male. One male does not support the next one. And then comes the chimpanzee, promiscuous with male troops. And what's going on at this transition? I have put many points of interrogation and a star. I do have models for that, but I have no time to speak about that. But I repeat the proposal I made in my first paper. The proposed scenario for such changes is the transition from unimale to multi-male social structures among hominoidea. The problem is between males. The problem is not with women. Women must care about the children and the next generation. But males have problems between themselves. So now I finish again with the private, come back to my private life. Here's the dinner commemoration, 50 years graduation in physics at USP. In 2012, because we finished in 62, look, these nice pictures, plenty of women. I had the lucky to be a group, plenty of men. This dinner I organized myself. I was already retired. I would like to speak about this photo, but only in the discussion, because I have no time for anything any longer, and also no time to add last papers I did. I have only a final message. Resume, my way. I like what is easy for me, but I have always been attracted for what I don't know. Maths is good, but to solve practical problem is better. Relationship man-woman, secret with 1,000 faces, dynamics turn around the world. And then these two complementary symbols. And so I think that's all that I had to say now. Now, if you have some questions specific from my paper, I don't know if we have still a little bit time to answer, or only at the discussion, at the final discussion. Huh? So that's it. I thank you very much for inviting me.
Hello. Now we are going to listen to Ana Maria. It's a brief presentation, around 7 minutes. And after we will listen, we will have the pleasure to listen Maryanne Fischer with a talk with around 25 minutes, I think. Okay?
Good afternoon, actually. Today, I have the honor of being part of this very important event, the 4th Brazilian meeting on evolution of human behavior. We have been together for almost 4 days, discussing our research mainly in Brazil, but also around the area, the region of Latin America, with many interesting international collaborations and everything, which is extremely relevant on the topic that is gathering us here today. So I would like to just say a few words about evolutionary psychology and basically to tell about very briefly about my trajectory, because to encourage everyone to follow their inspiration in this wonderful field of evolution of human behavior. So basically, I am right now, I have a PhD. I have a very unusual academic formation. I did my undergraduate at the University of Texas. Then I followed with a master's at the California State University in San Bernardino. And then I went back to my country, Chile, to do my PhD, and I did my postdoc back in Santa Barbara with Lida Cosmides. So it's a very diverse formation. And with that formation, I have to say that feminism, or the development of women in the academic field of evolution of human behavior, has been a fascinating path to follow. Uh, so I started doing research with Dr. Dev Singh in the ways to liberation, attractiveness, and how women and men had sex differences in what was attractive, what they seek, what make them attractive, etc. And then from there, my interest went into jealousy and the sex differences that were being discovered back in the by the end of the 90s, the beginning of 2000 of the new century. So that was my main line of work. But when I arrived to do my master's at California State University, I had a deeper um, motivation, which was to study love from this perspective. So I can say after almost, 15 years of that, um, now I am studying love. How does this happen? Because I was fortunate enough and I had the honor of meeting the wonderful women that are part of the Society of Evolution of Human Behavior, the International Society of Human Ethology, and of course, NIBS, which is a much younger society, but has promoted the work of women within the field, understanding maybe the needs of women, women diverse. I come from another country, and all this research is mainly done in North America and Europe. So I have to say that that's why I accepted this invitation. But then I thought, who is the person that mostly knows about female evolutionary psychology? And that's why actually you had invited her to attend this meeting, but she couldn't do it because she was doing most of her work as a woman. She had personal issues, which are part of being a woman in academia, that didn't allow her to be here. So I was like, I have to go back to Santiago. I will be flying by the time you're listening to our talk. But, I asked Maryanne Fischer to please talk about FEPS the Female Evolutionary Perspectives Society, which is part of NIPS, to actually give a more elaborated, formal notion about what is the feminist role in the evolution, in the research on the evolution of human behavior. So that will be the second part of this symposium presentation. Maryanne will present what she prepared to you all and for us to discuss. And I want to thank you very, very much for having me this week, for having us, all the women that were part of this meeting, and particularly Yarka, because Yaroslava Valentova is one of our most prominent researchers, who is a mother of two little kids, two little children, and she put together all this meeting wonderfully. So thank you very much. I wish you all a wonderful symposium, and we'll be talking. There is my email, there's Maryanne's email, and we can plan whenever you want a short meeting. You can write, and we can continue talking a bit about this wonderful initiative that you're pulling together. Thank you very much, and I will see you very soon.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to my home in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, where it's probably a lot colder here than it is in Brazil. It's unfortunate that I couldn't be in Brazil personally, but I am overjoyed to have the opportunity to have a bit of a voice. And Ana Maria asked me if I would like to speak about the Feminist Evolutionary Perspectives Society. And so I've thrown together something very quickly that she can share with you. So I'm going to review briefly some of the obstacles and the benefits of bridging a feminist perspective with evolutionary views of human behavior. And then I'm going to mention some of the work that we did as a society and how it was formed and what our missions are, and then mention some future directions. So the Feminist Evolutionary Perspective Society, I think we should begin there and then backtrack into why it was needed. It supports research that is one of three things. It's either informed by a female perspective, so it's really paying attention to the role that women have had, or some of the issues that are faced by women, or how women's evolution has proceeded, or really putting women as a focal point of research. Second, it considers research that directly investigates the active role of females, that how females have been active during the course of human evolutionary history, for example. So instead of painting women as being the passive recipients of men's competition for mates, it's instead looking at the ways that women have engaged in active situations, or really being a pivotal part of human evolutionary history. And third, it includes research that studies gender in an evolutionary context, using scientific theory and methods, including, for example, a close examination into the way that research questions are formed, the bias that can go into even just making a hypothesis, or how research participants or subjects are selected for research studies. So it's really looking at all the potential sources of bias and trying to be either inclusive or at least drawing attention to the potential issues that have arisen. Now, I was one of the founding members of FEPS, and I formed it with my co-chairs a long time ago now. We've written about that publicly, so you can contact me if you want, and I'll share that history with you. But we formed the society out of frustration, and we were, I would say, as a group, fairly well read about, Bobby Lowe's work, Sarah Blaffer-Hurdy's work, Linda Mealy's research, Marlene Zook, all sorts of fantastic women that have been active within evolutionary psychology. And we were hearing talks repeatedly at conferences that painted women as being very passive. And our frustration led to something that became the society. We formed the society over breakfast at the Northeastern Evolutionary Psychology meeting. And by lunchtime, we had 29 members and quickly grew thereafter. We have about 400 members. We meet once a year, and the meetings are treated as workshops. They occur right before NEEPS, so the Northeastern Evolutionary Psychology Society. We have about half a day. The way the meetings have been structured has changed greatly over the years. It used to be really about working groups who would sit down, and we would share a central reading at first. Sometimes it was something like Hurdy's work or an article, and we would discuss it, and then we would break into groups based on interest, and then see if we can get any sort of research projects going. And that worked with, I'd say, minimal success at times. We've done other models more recently where we've had presentations, and I think one of our biggest accomplishments was that we are now part of the NEEPS regular conference program. We have one part of the conference dedicated to FEPS symposiums. So these are talks that are marked as being FEPS related. They are, anyone from NEEPS can submit, anyone from the general world can submit if they want to NEEPS, and they get to decide whether they want it to be considered as a FEPS talk or not, which means it goes into the symposium. The other thing is that FEPS has its own awards at the conference. So we have student awards for poster and talks, and we have faculty awards for poster and talks. The concern we have with those awards is we don't like the same people receiving them all the time. So there's an active attempt to make sure that those awards are given out completely based on merit, but at the same time taking into consideration that it's great to hear new voices. And so that's something that's always in the back of our mind. And it's also a bit of an issue trying to find people to chair those awards committees or to do the judging. So if you're thinking of going that route in the future, it's just a little bit of a hiccup where you have to figure out how you're going to make it work. But as I said, when we formed FEPS, it was really out of frustration. So we weren't alone. Within evolutionary psychology, there has been a growing dissatisfaction for how women have been shown to be in passive roles when it comes to essential survival and reproduction. And we weren't the first to say this. We will not be the last. But evolutionary psychology research has been misled due to assumptions of women as being very docile in mating, or generally neglected in topics such as mothering or female alliances or female aggression or physiology or intersexual competition, or just simply the role of women in human evolution at large. And I know that there's been pushback by the evolutionary psychology community saying, no, there's now a lot more work showing that women are active in mating, and that there's work now coming out on female friendships and alliances and cooperation. But that work is new and it's still in its infancy, but I'm grateful it's there. So I'm hoping that this is a shift we're seeing partly as a result of things like FEPS and initiatives that has led to. So we have to remember that I'm talking about when a society was formed a little while ago. So when these topics were examined, and even are examined today, they're often viewed in terms of how they affect women specifically, rather than human evolution overall. And that's a real shift, right? That's a framework shift. So if you're studying women and the generalizations are still remaining about women, whereas people who study men and then they make the generalizations about everybody, that's going to lead to very different conclusions. There are at least two huge obstacles. Feminist perspectives typically, if you're talking feminism proper, as a ideology or a research field, it doesn't usually rely on the scientific method or the empirical model for testing hypotheses and so on. But I'm trying to back up the train a little bit and simply get into the more philosophical issues, and that is addressing the mixing of science with policy and the value of studying sex differences. And these have been very contentious in research that feminists have scrutinized, and then how evolutionary psychology relies on, especially things like sex differences. So I'll give you some examples of where evolutionary psychology is being picked apart. So other disciplines like anthropology left the so-called man the hunter model long ago. And in this model, this is Lilian in 1968, we're talking, quite a while ago, but the emphasis of this model was on how men hunt and the importance of hunting, and that this is a male trait that's responsible for major human milestones like bipedalism and encephalization of the brain. And anthropology, as I said, left it, but other fields like our own were much slower. And anthropologists examined data for comparative models, foraging societies, fossil evidence, material evidence, and they really found minimal support. And evolutionary psychology, every now and then you see in some version, man the hunter comes up, and it really is problematic. Linda Fettigan, 1986, wrote, "The ethnographic evidence of contemporary hunter-gatherers in tropical and subtropical zones supports the economic independence claimed by the women the gatherer model, and no ethnographic examples exist of sedentary women and foraging societies being provisioned by their husbands with plant foods. Yet there's still advocacy in evolutionary psychology." So we're seeing that, even though we don't have the evidence to support these older models, they're still being used, at least as lately as 1999. And we've written about this more recently, where we're seeing this still being used in 2020. So there's a problem. Another example is art and literature are sexually selected like a peacock's train, and traits have been selected for in males and characterize females in part only after selection of males have taken place. So modern evolutionary approaches like that, the work of Jeffrey Miller, continue with this belief. There's this propelling of the idea that art and musicality are selected for in males, but that for females is really not all that important. And this is being used to explain major cognitive developments in human evolution based on the process of female choice for these traits in males. But in the arts, many of the sex differences that Miller and others rely on has to be partly due to lack of exposure, not necessarily lack of aptitude. We know that female painters, as one example, have very rarely been given the opportunity to have the training historically that male painters have had. So it's not that men are the only ones capable of producing these great works of art. It's that they've had often more access to the training that's necessary to produce those works of art. And I would go even further and say that there's more ability for them to get notoriety compared to women. These are generalizations, of course. There are many, many exceptions, but I think to feminists, when they read evolutionary psychology, it's very much an irritation when they see these generalizations come through, right? And they feel that there's no hope of an integration. So there's a need for change. Excuse me. Much of the scholarship pertaining to women in evolution has been about what happens to women, not how women actively influence and are fully a part of human evolution. So, for example, Don Simons in his 1979 book says female orgasm is a functionalist byproduct of male orgasm. We know that's not true now, but that model hung around for a very long time. Or early work on motherhood said that it was women's main role in evolutionary history, whereas more recent research shows that motherhood should be a center stage in human evolution. Sarah Hrdy's work has really, I think, turned the tide on that view, but it's been slow in terms of its receptivity. And, things like the infant-mother bond and how that has led to cooperation at a societal level, or the use of motherese and language, and how that has shaped humans' language over time. So it's really a slow shift. And in some ways, I get very frustrated that, it's 2022, and here I am still talking about these things that were raised by some of the Darwinian feminists much earlier. And here we are, So the first obstacle to integrating a feminist perspective with evolutionary psychology is this artificial distinction between what is and what ought to be. So, the goal is really to explain human psychology as it is. I fully agree with that, and trying to look at how it's been shaped over vast spans of time. But the problem is that when we do that and try to do it in a vacuum, just talking about what it is, we have to acknowledge that those findings are going to be sometimes agreeable. Things are very docile, like humans have evolved a craving for sweets, but sometimes they lead to very politically loaded findings, like men have evolved a tendency to rape under certain conditions, according to Thornhill and Palmer's work. And when we leave those findings in a vacuum, we open the door to all sorts of criticisms and misunderstandings. So evolutionary psychology as a field has to be aware of the potential to polarize entire disciplines with their work. And we need to take that caution in clearly and carefully and consciously when we're presenting our research. And that includes policing the field from within by its own members, which I feel we've done quite poorly in the past, and I think we're doing slightly better now. But we have to allow for criticism. And I do think evolutionary psychology stands out from many disciplines because we do allow our members of the field at large to dissent. We see dissension in journals. There's room for people like myself who feel that women need to have more of an active voice, and that's being listened to some degree. I don't think other fields are as receptive, so I remain hopeful. And I do remain hopeful as well because I'm now seeing a turn where there's consideration about trying to take the is, so explaining a behavior, and then applying it to policy. So this recent integration of how the is of evolutionary theory with the ought of policy, and that's being done by people like David Sloan Wilson with the Evolution Institute, which is a think tank that assists public policymakers in applying evolutionary research to improve policy issues such as childhood education and risky adolescent behavior. And I'm seeing more of that, although it's slow, I'm seeing more of that at play, at least within the United States. So another obstacle, the politicization of research on sex differences. So feminists look at how people are socialized to explain human behavior. So what we would think of as the nurture debate. Evolutionary psychology looks at the way in which our minds and behavior have been shaped over time. You might argue that's sort of a nature side, although for us, it's never, genetics in a vacuum either. It's, genes with the environment. So there's an awareness of the environmental pressures that have caused these developments to occur. But there's a growing movement to unite these two. And it doesn't have to be, all about the more nature side of some environmental influence versus socialization. There's room for both. And I think if we start integrating both, we'll end up with more of a Tinbergian view, right? Because we'll have the proximate and the ultimate working together, which is the strongest paradigm possible. So scholars who address the female side of evolution, like Patricia Gowdy and Sarah Hurdy and Bobby Lowe and so on, these are sometimes called the Darwinian feminists. They've examined how a potentially male-biased view of evolution has misshaped predictions and interpretations about human evolutionary processes. And there are many other examples. These are just some examples I had at my fingertips. And by looking at things that are lopsided and trying to rebalance that, so going to older work and looking at it now from a new angle and a more integrative angle, we can get somewhere. So Hurdy, for example, looks at human competition versus cooperation, and she points out humans alone among the great apes will tolerate and help non-related individuals on a regular basis. So she has made a strong argument that our propensity to cooperate is deeply entwined with the need for multiple caregivers to invest in human offspring. So cooperative breeding has led to cooperation across groups, and this shift in thought is only possible when scholars examine and correct historical biases in evolutionary science. So where I'm at is I'm now at a point where I'm stepping back a bit and I'm trying to think about how we can look at women and the role women have had in human evolutionary history, tie it to my empirical background as a biologist and a psychologist, and try to come up with experiments that address that. And the topic of mothering is one that I think we need to really, really, I was going to say latch on to, but I guess that's not necessarily a good pun to say, but I think we have to explore it more. It's one of the most prevalent topics in evolutionary studies on women, but it's disheartening to see that's not more discussed. Human survival depends on the strategies that women employ for mothering. Women are faced with a multitude of decisions when they're mothers, whether or not to invest in a child, who they should have a child with, who they should align themselves with for support, who they must compete against in order to acquire a good mate, what their gametes might be doing to ensure fertilization, all those things at every level whether we're talking at a gametic level, so biology, all the way up to looking at a social systems model. There's room to look at mothering, and that's only one of the many things that women do. So bridging evolutionary psychology and feminist thought, I think, is extremely productive. It doesn't mean it's going to go well, and it doesn't mean it's going to 100% line up. I don't think there's any harm in admitting when it doesn't work, but the benefit of doing that, even if it fails, is it opens up new lines of inquiry. And it's really necessary to start to correct past assumptions to better understand human behavior. We cannot keep growing our field using models that are flawed. We need to start looking at those models, critiquing them, shaping them to better reflect where we're at now, and then continue. And I don't think this can be overlooked. From what I hear in interviews I do and talking with people that are members of all the various societies, there's a growing discontent from within evolutionary psychology. And I'd say that discontent is from younger scholars. I'm hearing a lot of graduate students and just recent postgraduates talking about how they feel disenchanted with a very stifling view of, say, sex and gender and sexual orientation. They want something that's more multidisciplinary. They want something that's more inclusive, more intersectionist, and we can do that. So the Feminist Evolutionary Perspective Society used to be called Feminist Evolutionary Psychology Society. We were all about initially trying to get the word out. And I think this is where we really gained momentum. We, we did special issues of journals. So we did a couple of them, actually, Journal of Social Evolutionary Cultural Society, Psychology. We did a more recent one for Evolutionary Behavioral Science. We actually did an edited book, and it wasn't just FEPS members. We formed it within FEPS, and then we went wide, and that's Evolution's Empress, Darwinian Perspectives on the Nature of Women. A fantastic read, if I do say so myself. But the reason I bring this up is I think if there is a way to go forward with momentum, is to have a common goal. And I don't represent FEPS now. I'm not the co-chair. I'm just a member. My life has shifted with children and looking after my family and my mother and so on. So I'm just a member. But what I can say is that by having a goal of trying to come together and share a collective knowledge with the scientific literature, I think it gets heard. And so I would deeply encourage you to think of a way that you can make a proceedings issue that is feminist in tone, for example, as a starting point, or see if you can get a journal that will do a special issue and then put the call out to everybody. But your core members are the people that are helping with the selection process or serving as guest editors or things like that. So I don't know if that helps. Books are also a great thing. Oxford University Press is a fantastic publisher. There are many other great publishers as well, but I think you need a product. I think you need something that represents you at the end to show where you're at right now and then go forward from there. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm sorry I went a little bit long. I get very excited about these things. I'm happy to talk further. My email address is here for you. And good luck. I wish you all the very best. Goodbye.
Conclude our symposium with one presentation divided by two, me and Lilian. This presentation will be divided into 4 parts. In the first one, I will talk about sexism and science and evolutionary psychology. In the second, I will briefly talk about the Northeastern evolutionary psychology, FEPS. Afterwards, in the third part, I will talk about the Maria Emilia Revolutionist Collective, or Coletivo Maria Emilia de Mulheres Revolucionistas, which sounds much better in Portuguese. And in the fourth part, we will talk about the products and tools to face obstacles. Well, actually, Maryanne Fischer talked about FEPS. FEPS was created around 2009, and I will back a little bit on history. So, women generally, actually, we are living in a patriarchal society, actually. So science appears as a male profession. This is obvious, but I have to highlight. So as women were forbidden to study and were restricted to the domestic sphere, I don't know how to handle all this stuff. Melhor. Let me see. So when women beginning to enter into universities, until when women were there, they were a lot of resistance. You can go doing all the clicks. Yes, another one. There is a well-known effect that was coined by Margaret Rossiter, the Matilda effect, that is a social effect that explains that which not recognize the scientific woman, academic work of women, attributing it to their male colleagues. A classic example, of course, you may know, is the Rosalind Franklin. Rosalind Franklin was a chemist and an X-ray crystallographer. She died at 37 years old and received no recognition for her discovery on the DNA structure. And of course, who gained the Nobel Prize? Their male colleagues called Francis Crick and James Watson, and after her boss, also Maurice Wilkins. Pode ir pro próximo. Ah, tá. Okay. Just remembering... Ai, peraí que eu me perdi. Peraí, tô perdida. I'm nervous. Okay, let's talk about a little bit sexism in Darwin's writings. In 1891, Darwin published The Descent of Man and the Selection in Relation to Sex. This is a very important book of Darwin's, and despite of that, it was full of gender stereotypes that shaped Darwin as a scientist in that time in Victorian England. And as an example, Darwin wrote that men were superior in intelligence and creativity, and that women had superior moral qualities than men. So you can think, but was Darwin, we cannot analyze this kind of thing in 2020 or 2022, but Caroline Kennard was an American suffragist that when read The Descent of Man, she decided to, on that time, they communicated by letters, not from WhatsApp. So in December 1881, Caroline Kennard wrote to Darwin asking him about his position on female inferiority. In January 1882, Darwin replied to her saying that in native cultures there was gender equality and women could be the heads of their households, but this could cause some damage to the domestic sphere. Also, in January 1882, Caroline Kennard was not satisfied with Darwin's quote, And she said that actually women do not have the same educational environment and opportunities to develop the same intellectual abilities as men, actually. And Darwin, as a white rich man, different from Wallace actually, ignored that women from the lower classes and other societies have always been as fundamental as men to support their homes. And Darwin ended up ghosting Caroline Kennard. Do you know what is ghosting? So he did this. Pode ir para a próxima. This is a letter published in 2013 by Tammy Meredith from St. Mary's University, the same university as Maryanne Fischer. And Tammy said that evolutionary psychology is dominated by men who represent a higher number of authors, and they are very concentrated in the first authorships, as you may know. One consequence of this prevalence of male bias in evolutionary psychology is that these men use their male perspectives, you guys that are here today, interpreting and presenting the results and choosing the topics that we are talking about in evolutionary psychology. Another consequence is that topics related to males are seen as more general, while those topics related to females are seen as more specialized or applied. And finally, women in the field have not been recognized as influential scholars as men, highlighting the need of feminists' approaches to ensure that women's ideas, views, and interpretations to be heard. Pode passar. This is another paper published by Rebecca Burke. It's from 2020. I like the title. That is More Than Just a Pretty Face, The Overlooked Contributions of Women in Evolutionary Psychology Textbooks. I don't know, but I like to give exercise. Think about your bibliography which you used to give to your students, and look, try to how can I say, tirar? Take off the books or written by males and see what stands in your, how can I say, estante? Huh? Bookshelf. Estante in Portuguese, because it's important that you learn a little bit Portuguese also. Okay, so Rebecca, as an evolutionary feminist who claims that the most textbooks in evolutionary psychology discuss mostly about female attractiveness in detail. Come on, guys, are enough. And they omit female, some topics like female creativity and intelligence, overemphasize men as providers of their households, and neglect a major part of some female life cycle, like they omit sometimes older women, and they omit sometimes children active role, for instance, neglecting also development, infant development sometimes. Pode passar. Well, here actually Maryanne Fischer already said about the Northeastern Evolutionary Psychology Society, but I don't know if you know NEPS. So I just like to highlight that this society was funded by Glenn Gleher in 29, if I'm not wrong. And as Maryanne Fischer said, they are always doing annual meetings. And as Maryanne Fischer said, in the reunion, the meeting in 2029, they was there and they noticed that the majority of the posters and the presentations was about female attractiveness and reproductive value. And just a minority of the papers or the presentations was about motherhood, active female role on partner choice, and an ancestral diet. But I would like to highlight that, as Maryanne Fischer already said, that before the FEPS, there were a lot of women called Darwinian feminists, represented here by Sarah Hardy, Barbara Smuts. They are a great primatologists that are saying since, I don't know, 1970s about the active female role, that females are not coy, guys. Actually, they studied a lot of primate species like langurs, Barbary macaques, and they saw a great variety of sexuality. So we cannot talk about, nowadays, still talking about female to be very passive or coy. So it's Lilian time.
Oh, okay, it's my time. I thought that it was Renata's time, but okay. So again, to improve, I really love that. This time I wrote. Actually, Renata wrote for us, because the first 2 minutes for my brain to turn in English. So to improve inclusion, I will describe myself. I am a white woman with short blonde hair. I'm wearing black glasses, a red t-shirt, and a black coat. So here we are, like Renata said, it's 2022. So until now, we have this sexist postures. So here we have 2 men that works in STEM, and both men say that women is a problem. We are a problem to research because we distract them. Sorry guys if we are so interesting, but we have this great documentary called Picture a Scientist that was from 2020. And in this documentary, we have a lot of girls, scientists, women that tell us their stories about harassment in academic. So we have someone that is related to those guys that won a prize from a discovery of a woman related to DNA structure. So there we can see a former student told for us this event. And we still look in parity in science. Actually, 1 in 5 countries until today, nowadays, achieved gender parity. So we have a lot of work to do. And from this moment, always that is possible, we will present our slides in Portuguese and English, always thinking in diversity. Okay, próximo. Just here, in the last 5 decades, only 11% of science women won the 50 most prestigious award. Just an example, Donna Strickland, that won the Nobel Prize in 2018, after 55 years since Marie Curie and Maria Cooper-Meyer won the prize. Próximo. And now our collective. So you know about all these scenarios. So let's go back to 2019, and we were. I was not there actually, neither Renata, but our colleagues Fietka Rodrigues and Melina Vax, both evolutionary psychology.
I was prohibited by my female boss on that time, just remember.
They were on, qual que era no HBS, né? They were on HBS, the third, this event, the third Brazilian meeting, thank you. And they were in this main course or short course, Female Empowerment in Science. Then it starts our collective. And this was based on their problems which evolutionary biased focus. Okay, próximo. So here, that they told us, our name was chosen to honor Dr. Maria Emilia Yamamoto, one of our most important research in Brazil in the field. She was and still is a role model for us as a female scientist, always been open to new ideas and ready to receive everyone interested in learning about human evolution. We, as a group, hope to honor her name, and as good primates, hopes to follow our cooperative female leader, welcoming every woman here to participate in the collective. It was told in 2019, and now we are told you are welcome to be part of our collective. So we are? We are nowadays about 40 women scientists, professors, students, researchers, not only in the academia. Now Melina, for example, is in the market, and she's there acting like a feminist MP. And we have two main axes to question sexist bias and to provide empowerment to women in science. So here are our two axes and some of our activities. So discuss active role of women on evolution, re-examine previous findings, search for underrepresented topics, and to improve diversity within evolutionary psychology. And in our extension activities, we support the production and dissemination in science, using Instagram, Twitter, and events participation, like the short course that Renata gave us on Monday. We have to discuss sexist bias in science. We had a study group that was made during the pandemic with girls from all of the country, and make international materials and events accessible to Brazilian Portuguese. So now we are translating a book from a woman that works with evolutionary psychology, and we did some interventions in academic contests. Here, not Space Kids. We are just, you know, that in Portuguese, we talk about Espaço Kids, that place to kids to stay. Here, in this, we thought, and we asked for the financial support to give us money to allow mothers to come to our meeting, and we didn't receive it. We asked it. We want a space for kids. We want someone to take care of the kids. So mothers, maybe even fathers, why not, could be here. And we did not receive this money. So, okay, próximo slide. And just one more example. Okay, I try to fast. We had here at USP a prize, and among a lot of scientists that were running, all of them who won the prize was, or better, were men. All of them were men. And when we asked about how many men and how many women were running, we again received a ghosting. Ghosting is not Tinder novelty, okay? So just to show one more reason why we need to do this. Women, until 2019, could not do the spacewalk because there was no clothes. There was no suit for them. Just in 2019, they thought, oh, maybe this heavy suit is not good for a girl. That actually is a scientist, and that actually is an astronaut inside the rocket. But she can go out because she can't wear that suit. Really good, no? So, but you may think, what we can do? We can do a lot of things, and we are doing. I can assure that we are doing, or at least we are trying to do. So, pass to the next one. If you know, I don't know if you know, that is a movement called All Male Panel that could help you to point panels that are made only by men. So it's just you put this hashtag on Twitter, on your social media, and we will gather to change this. So here we had two examples, real examples for men's panel in Brazil last year. And what we are doing, again, okay, 3 minutes. We're improving female visibility. And here just a topic to know. We, as a collective, we started to put scientists, women, in Wikipedia. A professor from a federal university that is our colleague, he started with her students to put this. And every time that she put women in Wikipedia, they followed the women text. Every time someone did that, told that it was an spam, it was not true, and we can't put, and not just one, all names that we put on Wikipedia were crashed. Yes, she told us in one of our meetings. And here, just an example that one of our speakers that were working with feminine touch in evolutionary theory. Pode passar que eu tenho que correr. Here, Yarka and colleagues working under representation of women in Brazilian science. Next one. Ebook to get together women that do science and to call out on other girls to do science. And we have some support in action, this parenting science movement, and now we have the inclusion of maternity license to our curriculums, and now just here, some awards just for girls, we also have in Brazil, and another financial support and grants here in Brazil too. And I think that the last one is, we have an Instagram that you are invited to see. This is the last one. Please don't put the time over for me. And please follow us. Feel free to talk to us, to bring us any issues that you have. So thank you for everyone.
So guys, now it's time for discussion. And what do you prefer? To go to the table? Are you going to the table? Or? Okay. Okay.
Yes, I think that we could stay here.
Yes. É, eu acho. Uma foto. Lilian, posso agradecer que a gente não agradeceu a ninguém? Okay, so I just want to thank for a lot of people, beginning with the fourth Brazilian meeting of HBS, Marco, Yarka, and all the staff. We would like to thank also our fundings that are very small ones, but they made us keep on going on science here in Brazil. That is very tough and difficult, especially nowadays. And of course, I would like to thank FEPS, that I am a member nowadays, NEPS, and all these incredible women that make the collective with us.
So, any questions?
Hi, so I'd just like to thank you all for such an inspiring talks, each one of the talks. And it was such an honor to see all your work and dedication, Dr. Amaral. So thank you all so much for just opening paths for us to be women in science today. And I would also like to know more about the dinner that Dr. Amaral has organized, and she said that she wanted to talk more about in the discussion, so that's all. Thank you so much.
Okay, but the photo is there, so I don't know if somebody can put it. It was the one before the last. One before the last you can put. So our group in the physics was a very uncommon group, because usually the physics at that time, not many students, and even less women. So the year before us was less than 10 students and 2 women, and the year after us, again, it was 10 and 1 woman too. But our year was tremendous, because we entered more than 20 and over 10 girls. One of my colleagues usually to say that it was a Sputnik event, because the Sputnik went in orbit exactly in the 59 when we entered. And then it became very fashionable. Everybody thought the physics would solve the problems of mankind. And so many women from middle classes decided to study physics. And the men, they were very good the year before and the year later. In our group, the men did not appear so much. And it's not that they are bad, but the women are exceptional. So it was a very funny group. And so during faculty, I did not feel that there was a prejudice against women because, I mean, I was 20 years old. And of course, we were much more worried with parties and boyfriends and so on. We were not so much engaged in this problem. So for us, it was natural that there were plenty of men, but we are very happy there. So when you look at this picture, you see I am the red, with the red blouse, a bit more to the left, and I will tell you about who is who. At my side, it is Ana Maria Pessoa de Carvalho. She became the main woman to be at the Faculty of Education and to be the full professor in physics at the Faculty of Education and became director there. So she was my colleague the whole time long. Then if you go to the next, I'm here. Then you come to the last one, a very nice, smiling lady. She was the first woman to become full professor in engineering in Unicamp. So she was together with me all the years, and she also started with me at the reactor. I was doing nuclear physics, and she was doing electronics. But then her boyfriend was also in electronics. They got married. They moved to Campinas. And then she became first woman, and she was engaged with liquid crystal displays. Until today, she's very active. So it's interesting because the women, they did not follow exactly the academic career in physics, because I left the Institute of Physics and I went to the reactor. So I really made my career at the reactor in nuclear physics, but a lot of chemistry also. It was not just physics. And then the other went to education, was not strictly physics. And the other went to engineering. And then the second, at the side of the happy girl, Dagmar, she went to Rio de Janeiro, and she worked very important in nuclear energy. She got a very good position there also. Now, this girl at the middle, that is the happiest one, she never worked in physics. She just got married, and since it was an event, 50 years together, she was very happy to join us. But she's really the more happy of all, huh? Because the life of those that fight with the academic, and then there is a point, most of them were married with academics, so they had help. That was not my case. So I suffered the problem of competition with men. I was the only one that has never had a strong connections with the research by men. I had connection with very strong men and very powerful men, and they helped me because they were interested in helping me. But my studies, was never their idea. I have always followed my own ideas, and that's why I am not in the group of women physicists in Brazil. If you go to look to any of these books, I don't exist. I don't exist because all the women in physics are connected to men. And the whole politics goes against a person that does not follow. You know, all men follow a masculine tradition. So it is one powerful professor, then you have the students, and then the best students become also powerful. And so you have a genealogy of people in science, males. And then the females, they join these groups, and then they get the power from the men. And it was not my case. My only inspiration was my father, and he was not a physicist. And so I'm very happy with my career, but I had never had real recognition. Today, by coincidence, at the Physics Institute, one of the men that was the whole time long with me, I say that he was my friend and enemy, because we have been together for 50 years, and we are friends and enemies, because the power is with him. And now he's having a very big homage of 80 years old. And instead, I'm here. I did not even go there, because I'm happy with what I did, and I know that what I did, nobody else could do. That's all.
Someone else would like to discuss or?
Hello, I want to thank you for your presentations and for talking. It was very powerful to listen to. And I think that if we had more young students here, both women and male and men, they could be in some way inspired by what you have said. I wish my own students were here, because I think that's really moving, and I think it's inspirational. And it's something that we really have to talk to with the students, because if you don't encourage them, especially the women, we cannot have this transformation going on in the next generation. So I think that's really important, and I want to thank you all for this.
I just want to thank you for sharing your personal and also scientific experience. It was actually a very interesting part of this whole meeting, and I think it was really good to do it in the end, right? That's the right point after all that we have heard over here, and it is really important to try to be more inclusive and think about not only like different kinds of scientists in our own field, but also about really reshaping or rethinking methods and hypotheses and theoretical backgrounds, and also interpretation of our own data, because sometimes, of course, different people interpret the same data in different ways. So it's actually good to have diversity among researchers. So thank you very much for sharing your experience and your thoughts, and it was very important. Thank you very much.
This is it?
Mais ou menos acabou?
Do you want to, so I think that we are actually coming to the end of the whole meeting. So do you have something else to add, or that you have forgotten, or that is important that you would like to share? There is the last moment before we would do the final closing ceremony of the whole meeting.
Just join us.
join on Twitter. We have a Twitter.
Microphone.
So please follow us on Twitter, on Instagram. We made a lot of lives during the pandemic. My gosh, and no one can deal anymore with lives, but we did to talk some specific topics about science. And actually, we translated Lilian talk a little bit about a very important masterpiece from Sarah Hardy called The Woman That Never Evolved from 1981. So we translated to Brazilian Portuguese because it's very important for us to make science democratic and accessible for all. And so, what? Hardy was with us. Actually, we wrote a preface. I think it's the right intonation in English. So we were very glad and honored. So maybe next year the book will be published by EduSP and Harvard University Press. So keep in touch. And I would like to just a comment. Actually, I would like to highlight that we have to amplify our samples, amplify our representativity of within evolutionary psychologists, not just collecting data with people from Global South, but also inviting us to write the papers because we have great ideas also. So, and of course, we need to pay attention in another sexual identities, sexual orientations, and we need to pay attention about indigenous people and try to do a decolonial psychology. Okay? This is it, I think. Thank you very much.